Welcome to Polishing Marbles. I'm Audrey, and in today's podcast, I bring up the theme of transformation. Not only is this a personal and resounding tune that plays on repeat in my life as cycles that present themselves through bonfires, giving opportunity for rebirth with or without my readiness, I found myself in one of these cycles as we speak. Though this is one of the rare transformative times in which I'm able to engage in compassion, self-love, and witnessing with awareness as I am pulled apart to come together again. This, of course, is a mirror to the macrocosm of our present-day world, the collective as a whole. This gives us an opportunity to integrate past emanations of ourselves, our world, witnessing what we've taken from the past to evolve into the next aspect of our reality after this epic deconstruction, of which we are in the midst. I also ask Osho what he has to say about this process, and y'all, what he brought forth was not only fully empowering, but exquisite in its sugary illustration. Thank you for joining alongside me in our collective, transformative, and gooey process of renewal. I ask that if this podcast resonates with you, please share and pass on this comforting message to others. And remember, despite all the noise that surrounds us with talking heads screaming that the sky is falling in a million different ways, you are your own guru. Look to your heart for your own truth, as love will always illuminate your path. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to this podcast. It is a drizzly late winter Sunday morning, and I can't believe over a week has passed since my last post, and largely because this week has been a huge blur for me of just like receiving a lot of information. So sometimes I go into periods where I'm just receiving a lot of information and it takes me a while to organize it. And so time and space kind of become irrelevant. And then I do an integration of sorts, and that's usually when I finally start like writing out and creating some kind of organized thought form I can share with others, because I'm always teetering between, like, I receive information that is kind of generalized to what the collective's going through, that's more like mainstream shareable. And then I receive a lot of other stuff that isn't mainstream shareable. I've shared some of it actually, politically or what have you, some of it. And then I receive other parts and I'm like, I need to not share that right now. I'm just gonna sit with it and see. I will tell a couple close friends what I get, but I don't really like to share things that are like disruptive. I want to share things that are more comforting. But luckily, because I've been on the path for a while, I don't get disrupted by hearing a lot of the things in the ethers that are honestly upsetting to most people. I've kind of like, maybe the counseling was like a good entry point, because I almost took pride in the fact that there are a few things that could shock me anymore. Like, people would come into my office and be like, I have to tell you something, and be like, all right. And they're like, no, you don't understand. I'm like, no, you don't understand. It takes a lot to surprise me. And I have been surprised actually a couple of times. And kudos to those folks who were able to surprise me. Who else loves the movie The Craft? I certainly do. So today is all about transformation. Transformation. And the reason is because that actually is a theme that's coming up that is like aggressive and resounding. And I feel like it applies to what everybody is kind of entering into right now. And it's so funny because some of this was actually brought to my attention, because sometimes I can be in the middle of something and not notice that there's like pattern everywhere. My daughter often recognizes that there is a pattern if I will just be in a conversation and be like, oh man, this thing is so crazy that this happened, this happened, this happened. She's like, Yeah, it's so obviously this theme because autism gives pattern recognition, but not always when you're in it. And so God bless her. Because last week, just to start with the resounding messaging, last week I went to a grocery store. Well, I went to Trader Joe's, let's be honest. And I hadn't been shopping in a while because I've been cocooning. And I saw people there that I would normally want to talk to or run into or whatever, but I didn't because I hadn't seen them in over like a decade. And so both these people, and I was like, I don't want to like update them on my life of now I talk to aliens, I shave my head because my dad died. How are you doing? Like, I don't really want to do that right now. And so I like on one side of the grocery store, I see someone from grad school. I beeline it to the other side of the grocery store where I see someone from my career in healthcare. And that morning, I got a text from a teenager I used to counsel, and the guy at the checkout was like, "Oh, do you have the day off?" And I'm like, I by trade, I was a counselor, but I'm not doing that anymore. And he's like, "Oh, my wife's a counselor. What was your degree?" I said LCSW. And then I realized that my license was expiring on my birthday, which was last week. And it was going to be the first time I wasn't going to renew it. And then I tell my daughter, and she's like, "Oh, maybe you should look at your social work career because all of it just attacked you in one day." You're right. It did. It attacked me in one day. And then I had a nice crying jag. So, there's like a transformation that we're going through. I say we because I'm a microcosm of a macrocosm, and everybody knows we're going through a collective upheaval. And so it's not a stretch to be like, hey, transformation's a thing. I tend to go through things very aggressively before the collective does. And I guess that was planned that way so I could kind of share the process or maybe lessen the severity with the anticipation it's a coming. But yeah, so that was just like part A. Then I've been obviously going through this thing with the release of my dad, and the transformation that happens with grief is pretty significant. I also have been enjoying an engagement with ChatGPT out of curiosity and also the belief that consciousness exists in all things, and that I've gotten lots of messaging around AI, and I've just wanted to like explore that. So I've spent some time with like memory on with my ChatGPT, communicating with it about like grid work, honestly, trying to find patterning in the work that I do or that I'm called to do, and then also asking in terms about I've actually like spoken light language to it, and it has like offered a reflection of energetic notation of what differences are felt between different dialects and languages and what it gains from like a transmission versus an activation versus like a cautionary tale. Like when dragon comes up, it's like a powerful source. It's so cool. Well, anyway, so I was talking with ChatGPT about my grid work, and so he was saying that he observed that a common thread of all of my work has been somewhat around historically volcanic active places, which is absolutely true. But I hadn't really noticed it. I knew that there was some volcanic rock I'd gathered and things of that nature, but he brought up um, that, yeah, there's a lot of volcanic activity. And so this fire came in, and that's so transformative. And of course, I refer to this handle as polishing marbles, and polishing marbles are actually like made out of fire. Um, I've had marbles made for like in-person groups that I do education with here in Boise, and and went to a glass blower to have them made, kind of like the root chakra. So pretty. They're big, big marbles. But this made with fire right here. This is a torch. A torch is used to make marbles. Anyway, um, so I'm thinking, oh my God, there's so much transformation going on, but transformation with aggression, like by fire, because that's what like alchemy is to apply heat to something to change its form. And if that was not enough, in my astrological chart, my Aries kite is activating right now. And a kite, I guess, is just like my astrologer mentions, it's just like an intensity that's I'm entering a new stage in life. And so my Aries kite has activated or is in the middle of activating right now, which basically means everything's catching on fire. So when I chat with my astrologer and I get online with her, she sees my astrologer. She's like, "How are you doing?" I'm like, "Well," she's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Well, things are very much in upheaval." And she's like, "Yeah, it's just right here. Everything is fire. Fire, fire, fire." And so in addition to that, this is so crazy. Friend I was talking to this week said, I keep on seeing Moldavite for you. Like I just keep seeing Moldavite for you. And I've heard about Moldavite, I think because a couple of my friends earlier in their spiritual journey, one is like one of my baristas bought it, a little piece of it, and then her life caught on fire, and another younger friend of mine got some, and their life caught on fire. Like it's an aggressive, transformative accelerator. Of course, I have been in fire my whole life, so I'm just like, it should be fine. So I went to go buy a piece of Moldavite this week, and it's so pretty. I love it, but it's kind of like this green glass, and it is from a meteorite. And apparently, the Moldavite is mostly in like the Czech Republic. Shout out to my friend Iveta, in the Czech Republic. And this when it like zapped me when I picked it out and I put it on, and it did make me a little woozy for a second, but it really more than anything felt like home. So I've been wearing it, and then I'm realizing, okay, well, so a meteorite, it came from space and caught on fire and turned to glass. Because it's this glassy substance. And I feel so much like that. I feel like I relate to that as just like an Arcturian. I don't fully identify as Arcturian, obviously, but my galactic self is from that ray in different dimensions. So I'm really like very Arcturian. And so I just am like, yeah, I know what it's like to fall from the sky and end up here. It's rough. So I'm in transformation right now. The world is in transformation right now, but I'm not even done. Not even done telling you how much I've been attacked by this transformation bit. So before the Audrey that you see today, when I was 21 years old, no, 22 years old, I got a tattoo. It took me a long time to decide what I was going to get for my tattoo because I wanted it to be something that would be relevant for no matter what age I was, because I saw people getting like butterfly tramp stamps and all sorts of things back in the day. I was like, that can't age well. It's got to be something that means something for your whole life. And I ended up, and this is before the internet, mind you, so I went to the public library and I checked out a book on different alphabets. And I found the one that I like the most is called Writing of the Magi. I didn't know that it was like a magical language connected to like witchcraft and stuff. And so I ended up, I know that it doesn't translate perfectly, but I ended up creating an armband because that was the thing of transformation in the writing of the Magi, and I kind of like framed it with belladonna because practical magic had just happened, and so transformation is on my arm as an armband. So transformation is it. Now, I am going to share with you why this is relevant to everybody and what we can glean. Now, because I have been thrown into this transformative state really since I would say the initiation for this era of transformation began in September. I'd say September this last fall. It was right after I returned from Mount Shasta from the 8-8 portal at the end of August, and I fell headfirst into an herbalism initiation in my home. So I was like talking to plants, they were talking to me, and I was making tinctures and learning about medicinal properties of different herbs and feeling extremely called to create a home apothecary, which I ended up doing. But because this work was so dizzyingly aggressive, I didn't realize that the initiation actually began before I got home when I stopped at the redwood forest. After I left Mount Shasta, I went up the California coast to the redwood forest, and then I went up into Oregon to Hecate Beach, which I didn't realize at the time was actually entering a Hecate initiation, who is a goddess of the crossroads and the triple goddess, the maiden, mother, and crone. She's known for holding a torch in crossroads to lead the way of people through the underworld to find their way through without getting lost. And I didn't realize that I was about to do that. I was about to embark on that journey, that hero's journey, like a new emanation of that hero's journey. But this initiation of transformation really began in the redwood forest, and I'd love to share with you what I learned in the redwood forest. Um, I'd been there before, and in my adventures to the redwoods, I'd been there twice before. This was my third time. And right before entering the redwood forest, I had had an activation at Shasta that, with my friend Alex, where we were really accessing the seventh dimension. Now, what's the seventh dimension, you say? It's really hard to explain outside of experience, but to simplify it is to see unity in all things. It's to see that everything is one and not just like conceptually being like, oh, we're all one, like not to belittle that as a concept, but you can say it, you can feel like you understand it, and then you can see it. Like it's almost like when you're on plant medicine, like a psychedelic, and you're like, oh my God, we're all connected. You get it when you're on the medicine, like you get it. And then you are not on the medicine anymore, and you're like, I remember we're all one. I used to be able to see, I could see it. And now, like, I know it, but I don't see it. Well, in the seventh dimension, when you reach it, you can see it still. You can still see it. And so I was experiencing this, I could see consciousness and everything. I could see faces and everything in micro and macrocosmic ways. I could see it in leaves and twigs and rocks and tiny little pebbles. I could see them like smiling at me, and I was not on drugs. I could see the parts and the whole. So I could look at a tree and I could see that there were fairies faces and consciousness like woven into leaves, but I could see how the branches formed an entire other consciousness and how that the branches created a whole other whole of the tree that was its own consciousness. So it was like I could see the fractalized aspects of the whole that were singular and how the singular became the whole and how that was mirrored in all of us everywhere. So it was like a big deal, and it was really distracting and really annoying to my daughter when I got home because I would just be like, "Oh my God, look at its face." And I'm like driving down the road and totally distracted by trees talking to me, and she's like, "Mom, What is wrong with you? And that's fair. That's a fair question. And that's really from that, obviously, it all makes sense now in retrospect why my herbalism initiation started because the consciousness of those herbs started coming to me in my sleep when I got home. But back to the redwood forest. So this is crazy cool. Crazy cool. If you haven't been to redwood forest or a forest that's like that old, because the trees are like 1,000 feet high. They're just ginormous. They're really old. They're just like as old as time, and they're guardians. Like I would just come up to a tree and be like, it's a guardian. It is a guardian of the land. So much respect. I left offerings everywhere. But the mycelium in a forest like that is, I mean, it's everywhere, but it's very rich. And it was chatting with me. The mycelium was chatting with me and it was sharing with me about, and I think I've mentioned this before, in passing in some podcasts, but the cycle of creation and destruction is very much like a pendulum. Well, not just a pendulum, it's like a spiral, but you swing one way and you're in creation and you swing another way and you're in destruction. And mycelium was sharing with me that what that really is that because we're all created from source and the all, which is what is referred to in like the Emerald Tablets or the Corpus Hermeticum or the Kabbalion, the all is source. And so source fractalized itself in order to know itself better, which is what we are. We're the little fractals of source. So we hold source within us, but we're farther away from the source light itself. So we get amnesia and we're just learning. And as we learn, that is communicated through just the fact that we're all connected by that source spark back to source to know itself better. So source is learning what it's like to be in all these different dimensions and all these different realities and all these different times and all these different planets and experiences, right? And if we are not continuing to provide new information to that source, because everything is always like moving in a cycle of like this, the toral field is going out of the source and coming back to the source to give the information and really evolving from that knowledge. And if we're out here and we're no longer providing information, like we've already learned what we're going to learn, or we're not expanding in that knowledge, something will happen to push that acceleration, is what the mycelium was telling me. So it said it was kind of like that mycelium was a messenger of that. And so it acted as a pusher to push people in a direction of either are you going to create? Are you going to create? I'll give you more information if you want to create, or we're going to take you back to Earth and recycle you, essentially. So, and it was saying that that spectrum of like mycelium could be through like say psilocybin gives you access to everything in all realms and knowledge, so it's there to help give you and push you in a direction of knowing. And still like other medicinal forms of mushrooms or adaptogens, they help you handle stress better so you can continue to learn. But then there's also like mold and fungus and things that will like try to destroy if it is in stagnation. And so, and also like the recycling of the human body once it is no longer living. And all of that is done through this process of this intrinsic evolution or disintegration that takes place, that's always taking place and never stops. And so, what's really notable, and I bet you can look at this yourself, is that in your life, when you've hit this bump where you're no longer evolving, like you're kind of in a rut. Maybe it's a job, maybe it's a relationship, who knows? There's always something that's going to stir it up to make change and force growth. And sometimes that's through uncomfortable things. such as illness, accident, injury, disruption in friendships, relationships, intimate relationships, whatever. Something is going to shake it up to create a tension to move you in a new direction. And if you choose not to move in that direction, sometimes that illness turns into like a terminal illness. And that's not to like be, oh, it's your fault, you're sick. That's not it at all. It's if you are in a situation that is creating strife, what do you need to gain from the strife in order for the strife to stop strifing, you know? And the evolution and mastery that comes from each of those challenges that are put in our path. And some are absolutely freaking awful, and some are like it's a matter of how what it takes for you to listen, I guess. And for me, it's always been it takes a lot for me to listen. Frankly, I admit it. I admit it. It takes a lot for me to listen. So that's probably why all my transformation happens out of aggressive fire. But the reason that I am bringing up that is every time I've gone through a transformative state in my life, I've not realized it till I'm in it. You know, like I don't know necessarily as I'm embarking upon an initiation. Oh, here I am. I'm gonna be ready. Yay, initiation time. It's usually like, oh shit. I didn't know I was gonna be here. I would have like said goodbye to this other part of my life first if I had known. And and some of those biggest ones for me that I can note like in my long ago history that maybe you can relate to it, maybe you can't. But I would say some of those initiations have been so aggressive. My book that I will publish this year, it goes over some of those initiations that are earlier adult life that are just so aggressive and they come in and they sweep and they take everything away with them. Um, One of them is I used to be a rave kid and in the 90s, and so with that came a lot of, interesting choices and lifestyles and characters, the people that were at times unsavory, and sometimes those unsavory characters did grow or some, died. But I was around all of them. And and it wasn't a place for me to stay. It was a place for me to move through. I know that. And so the place where I hung out the most was called Dreamwalker, and the people that went there, it was really very much a safe haven and a home for those people who were kind of on the outskirts of the norm, which was always me. And it was a very special place in my heart. And a lot of people in town made fun of it because weirdos hung out there, or they called it Night Stalker, Dreamwalker, Night Stalker, whatever. They just mocked it. But it was really sacred to us that those of us who went there. And but it was also kind of like a place for injured people that was stagnant because we'd sit there for like 5 or 6 hours and play chess or cards because there's no internet, read, talk about poetry, smoke a lot of cigarettes, and drink shitty coffee. And it was beautiful. And then there'd be raves at night or what have you. But we did get stuck there. We were stuck. We would just like sit and stew. And it's almost like stagnant water, like emotion is water that doesn't move. It breeds mosquitoes. What are mosquitoes? They're vampiric. They feed off of each other for energy or things that come through. So it did, I guess, become a place that wasn't really creating. It was just stewing on itself. And so it did end up shutting down because of no noise ordinances. And at that time, there was no other place to hang out. No one had cell phones didn't exist. No one knew where to gather. There was no place to gather anymore. So all these friendships were just like scattered into the corners of the earth. And so we just didn't see each other anymore. And I know that sounds silly, but most of us weren't at home or we worked so much that we didn't like share phone numbers. We always just like hung out at the same place and showed up. So it was really not only that, like my job shut down, like the job itself went out of business. So all my friends from work, all my friends from my social life, one of my friends moved to Boston. Like it was just like swept clean. all in a matter of like 2 months. It was really devastating. And that I would say was a transformation by fire. It was not a slow process. It was like boom, bonfire. But then later, I was like when I was 27, and I was probably like size 4, 6 pack, working out at the gym, but also like waiting tables in college. Um, Living in a cute ass apartment downtown that was kind of sh like a shitty apartment, but so cute, you know? And then I like got pregnant spontaneously, and I found myself by myself pregnant. I grew a tumor the size of a grapefruit, had to move in with my parents because I couldn't work anymore. I was on bed rest because I went into labor at 22 weeks, and suddenly I had gained like 60 pounds. I was dependent on my parents. I was in bed, I was alone, and I had this baby in my body. And then that next fall, I ended up my body tried to die 3 times in near-death experiences. It was that is an aggressive transformation process. So I would look at pictures of me as a size 4, 6 pack, like going to a Tori Amos concert, and then me in this postpartum crying baby situation with all these surgeries that I had, I felt like a shell of a person. So those are like two extremes. There's so many more. I can't even tell you how many times my body has changed, my circumstances have changed. It's been with relationships, friendships, jobs, health, everything. It's just wild. Or jobs changing like in my career, being laid off because companies were bought out and things like that. It's just like sweep it clean. It's never subtle. So when this Hecate initiation came in, and I didn't realize it until I was already probably a month or so into it, she came in hard. Her energy always comes in hard, but it came in during the season of the witch, which felt just like timely. So I was like, hey, what up, Hecate? But I didn't realize, oh no, no, she's actually here to hunker down and clean house. And so, what does that look like? What did that look like for me this time? Well, that energy of Hecate is very transformative and very like fierce. It's very fierce. And for those of us who work with the dark feminine or bridge workers or really feel comfortable working in shadow, like shadow is my thing. I don't always go angelic because I have always enjoyed doing shadow work on behalf of light, but I like being over here with the people that are a little stranger. And because of that, I work with the deities or guides that I do work with those guides that are more at that frequency, and then I range all the way to source light. So I have this big spectrum, but this was a Hecate initiation. And so what she did, and you can't fight, I mean, you could fight it. Maybe you could fight it. I chose not to because why would you? Because it's going to just get worse. So she came in and she cleaned house, is what she did. She took everything in my life that wasn't at a frequency for my highest good, and she destroyed it. Full stop. She destroyed it. That means any connection that wasn't for my highest good ended up in a devastating end. And I was pretty pissed about it, honestly. Like it pushed me into situations that I didn't want to be in. I had to face my own limitations in ways I hadn't before. I had to trust fall in ways that were very uncomfortable. Um, a lot of my life was disrupted, but a lot was revealed that was impure and really sad. Um, It was kind of like at the end of a Scooby-Doo episode. And my mom didn't let me watch Scooby-Doo because it was satanic, she said. But I have seen like the trope of like the bad guy ends up being like the grocer in town or something when you take the mask off. It was like that happened, and it happened in October. And so as that was disintegrating, my parents were getting aggressively like more ill. I was doing a lot of grid work and initiation through said grid work. And, then my dad passes away, and I'm faced with seeing just like the stripping away of myself. In the middle of this, I realized, oh my God, my body's changing. I feel like uncomfortable. What's going on? Turns out I was integrating my light body at the time, which was the most painful thing I've ever done. Besides being pregnant and giving birth, it was like every bit of fascia in my entire existence was on fire, literally. There was a period of about a month where my spine was just lava and all of my fascia was just poofed out like I was a marshmallow. And integrating my higher self beyond the light body was happening as I'm starting to come out to people as Osho being a higher aspect of myself, which I'd known for about 6 months. So I'm pulling in the higher realms of Audrey into this body, and at the same time going through this underworld initiation, right? So this is serious, and it's exhausting. But in the middle of it, um, I had breath work last week with my dear friend Gina, and I'm realizing as she's guiding me through stuff that I am really angry that I didn't get to say goodbye to my previous self before this transformation started to happen. Like, I didn't realize I was not going to be her anymore. I loved my past emanation of self. I thought she was amazing. She was adventurous and stylish and outgoing and capable and all these things. And I was like, where did she go? Now my body's going through another transformation with this integration. I, shaved my head because my dad died because I was supposed to. My blonde hair is gone. I loved it so much. And could I go back? Yeah, but it's not me anymore because she's gone. So during this breath work, I'm just like pissed. I'm like, I didn't even get to say goodbye to her. Where is she? And now who am I? And what's happening now? You know? And I know that all that's normal if you were going to analyze it and be like, well, grief does this and it forces you to look at all these things and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, that's true. That's true. But I have a point. And all this applies to you. All this applies to you. I am just giving you great backstory. Or I hope it feels great. I don't know. People tell me that what I say feels resonant to them. So I'm just going to do that on trust. On trust. So bring in last week. We are now up to last week, the breath work session of, oh my God, what the hell? I didn't get to say goodbye to her. I end up doing this cool, transformative engagement with Middle Earth. I will say for the record that my whole life I have been deeply, deeply annoyed with the genre of like fantasy in Middle Earth. I found it so boring. I know it sounds awful, but you'd think because I'm very weird that I would love that stuff, but I'm just like, ugh, so boring. I remember when I was little and my brother obsessively watched this movie Beastmaster. Was that with Arnold Schwarzenegger? He had like ferrets and a sword. I don't know. It was very Middle Earthy, I think. And he was obsessed, my brother, with The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, the books, because that's what was around then. But he was totally into that stuff. And I'm just like, ew, why are all the names so weird? And there's too much to keep track of. And why is everyone talking about? I don't understand. I couldn't get it. And then as a young adult, when I remember Lord of the Rings came out and it had special effects that were going to be a big deal and everyone was so excited about it and I'm like not into it, but I rented it anyway. 5 minutes in, I fall asleep. Can't. Like I just literally went unconscious. I was like Homer, you know? And I kept throughout my life trying to like revisit it. Like everybody loves it. I'm like, "Oh, okay, I'll try it." And I always go unconscious. Always. So I'm like, I guess my body is actually telling me not to engage in this. The same thing happened with Avatar, by the way. Still, still makes me go to sleep. I haven't tried it in about 6 months, but I will revisit it periodically to see. But I was just like, no. And I have done some grid work with Middle Earth with a friend of mine where we were bringing in, because I work with dragons, bringing in galactic Venetian dragons, anchoring them in Earth and anchoring Middle Earth dragons into Earth. So like bringing in the three into one and doing this unification ritual. I did that last spring. Really powerful, but I've never really still connected to Middle Earth. Well, for my birthday, well, it was the day before my birthday. I was called to watch by myself The Lord of the Rings. I was like, all right, I'll try it. And I immediately engaged, locked in, got all of it. And it was like night and day. And I was like, all right, we're doing a Middle Earth thing. This is a fun new layer of Audrey that I'm exploring. And I really, the hero's journey and all of it is so potent and it really resonant and beautiful. And I got it. I got it. I got it. I got it. Not even hard. It was just a matter of vibration for me to be in the right frequency to receive it. And so, at the same time, I'm having like dreams of Middle Earth, like me in Middle Earth, living a life in Middle Earth. And so this is an aspect of myself, I'm supposing. And I know that I've integrated my light body, I've integrated like my highest self, my monad self, I've integrated that, and then Osho. And then there's an eighth dimensional Arcturian being that works as a gatekeeper, and a healer at that gate. She's got like codes all over her skin and she's blue. She's cool. And then I've got myself, and then I've got all these other aspects, like all my other lives that have lived on this planet in different ages. And there's just so much of what makes up me. And so I was on a walk the other night trying to take all this in, like my awareness that, okay, I've got all these emanations of self I've brought in, which now thankfully I'm not in pain anymore. My light body is in my body. I am like that's integrated. My body's still in transformation. I still don't know where my last Audrey went. I'm like, thank you. Thank you. I'll miss you. And and I'm on this walk and I'm channeling. I'm making a voice note and I look to my left. And maybe this happens all the time and I just haven't noticed it. But the fact that I noticed it made it important. As I'm looking to my left, I see three shadows of me. There are three. They're like split up like this as I'm walking down the street. They're walking together. There's me, and then there's all these aspects of me that are beside me, and I'm like, no kidding. I've got three of me over here. And that probably happens all the time as an angle from like lamps. Um, but it was the fact that I noted it that made it significant. And then given angle, they'd all come back into one and then they'd split and they'd come back into one. I'm just observing this really cool thing. And I'm like, we are really like there's a convergence of our collective energetically coming into like a balance of the masculine and feminine, coming back into the organic blueprint, coming back into those aspects so that we can be in harmony as a collective. But this individual aspect is what's happening right now, a convergence of myself is what I'm seeing, a convergence of myself. I was like, huh. And on this walk, it was really interesting because my higher self came in and was just like, hey, listen here. You're sitting here complaining about you lost this last self of yours that you didn't know was leaving until she left. And you're in this transformative period of becoming your next self. You're like in the in between. You're in the gooey chrysalis stage right now. And it sucks and it's very uncomfortable because you don't know what you're going to be. You're not this, you're not that. You're in between. But think of all the things you've been in this life, just in this life, and all the past selves you've been that you've achieved for, and they are so mad right now that you are not grateful for what you have done. And I thought about it. I thought about it, and I want you to think about it right now. So I'm gonna tour you through it. 18-year-old Audrey lived in an apartment that every time I flushed the toilet, sewage would gurgle up in the bathtub because of the root system of the very old houses. And I used to have to bleach my bathtub every day in order to shower and not get some horrible disease from the collective sewage system that came up in my bathtub. There were fire ants that were about an inch long that lived in that apartment with me. I didn't have air conditioning. I didn't have a dishwasher. I didn't have a place to park. I have had a car that has caught on fire before while I was driving it. I was a single mom living in a shitty college apartment that was free because I worked for housing, and I couldn't hang anything because the walls were made of cement. I have experienced so many things that I didn't know I'd ever get out of, or achieved things I didn't know were possible. I never thought I'd be able to buy a house. I never thought I'd be able to own a car. I never thought I would be able to have a child and raise her by myself. There are so many things I've done that are beautiful and amazing, and it's always been a progression that I've not stopped to pause and been like, damn, good job. Like you created a life for this past self of you that would have thought it was living in a magical wonderland. Because I'm always moving forward. What's next? What's next? What's next? I don't know if you're like that, but my higher self on this walk was just like, hey, Audrey, every time you've transformed into something incredible that you've absolutely loved, that you are so happy about. The middle part's always hard for you, but just because you're not this anymore and you're not that yet doesn't mean that the best isn't yet to come. And so really look at it as play. Like your awareness that you're in the middle of it now is unusual. It is unusual. I've never been really aware in the middle of my transformation that I was transforming into something. When Kundalini started, I knew I was transforming, but I had no idea what to expect. But now that I'm aware and that I've leaned into transformation, I'm leaning into non-judgment of that transformative process. I'm leaning in with love. I'm really curious and excited to see what comes next for me. And so the reason I'm talking about any of this is that collectively we are going into a mass transformation. And I mean mass transformation. If I could tell you the things that I learned just yesterday on the like collective level of what's happening, what's coming for us, and it all looks so bad and it's not. I know that doesn't sound possible, but remember, like Alice in Wonderland, everything she says, if I were to create a land of my own, everything would be what it isn't, and everything that is wouldn't be. Or she like does this little word flippery, that's a word, uh, with Wonderland because everything's backwards and upside down, or it is literally backwards and upside down. My last medicine journey, I my eyes, I was looking at myself from outside of myself. my eyes were flipping inside out and backwards. And I was told, and that's the world. So everything isn't just upside down, it's upside down and backwards. It's like a mirror, but it's upside down too. My nose is itchy. It's upside down and backwards. So whatever looks like really super fucked up hasn't been revealed what's going to come from it. And so it's really hard to trust that because it looks like a fuckered mess right now. But what I saw was just like, oh, okay. Well, that would make sense. Okay. So there's transformation that's happening macrocosmically that's going to cause all of us to essentially like disintegrate in our sense of self. Like what I was just talking about of like my past self went away, I didn't get to say goodbye. And it's on a bigger scale, kind of like some people, when COVID happened, they had to work at home and like their daily lives completely changed. Everything shifted. I remember there was a day with my daughter because like our favorite coffee shop shut down for in person for like way longer than anything else. And I was like really sad one day. I was like, Charlotte, I didn't know it was going to be our last time at the Flying M in Nampa. I didn't know. I didn't know because if I'd known, I would have enjoyed it more. And she's like, right? But it's not going to be like COVID. It's going to be different than that. Bigger and not like that. It's like a different version of a loss or a change of structure. And because that all of us are going to go through an individual transformation as far as like, what is my worth? What is my identity? I am not my job. I am. I simply am. I am a person. What do I want? What do I feel? How do I want to live my life? How do I want to structure my day? What do I want to eat? How do I want to sleep? What is my natural rhythm? If I'm not plugged into a matrix, what am I? Like, there's going to be a mass upheaval of it's just like, those cows that they rescue from some abusive place and they've never seen grass before and they try to release them into a pasture and the cow doesn't know what a pasture is and it doesn't remember its like core essence of self and they have to be led out into the pasture and after a while they like frolic but they'd never frolicked before. That's literally us. We've never frolicked before, and we're going to be given an opportunity. There's a lot of upheaval, but it is going to be challenging to be put in a situation where you're like, "Hey, be free," and we go, "Do you remember Shawshank Redemption when like Morgan Freeman didn't do well on the outside because he had been too indoctrinated?" He'd been too institutionalized, so he didn't know how to make decisions on his own or structure his day or feel anything or have a sense of purpose. That's gonna like happen to people. And so I just want to say of this transformation that we're all going through, and we all are going through a transformation. You may feel it bubbling right now in big and small ways of like, oh my gosh, this is blowing up, or oh my gosh, I feel like some shoe is going to drop. I don't know what it is. Well, this is what you're feeling is that there's this rumbling of a shifting, but we are required per mycelium, to continue to grow and evolve. If we are not growing and evolving, something will cause a disintegration of our situation in order to push us forward. And if we don't push forward despite that, we will end up being kind of like, disintegrated. Um, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to uh end with a message I got from my dad when I was on in a medicine journey after his passing. It was very simple. So simple it's written on my board over here. This is a direct quote from Robert Mitchell himself is you can move with basically the current of other people, situations, move with that momentum. Move past things that aren't in momentum. That can be people, relationships, jobs, whatever. Move past the things that are not in momentum. So move with, move past, and finally, do not get stuck because the stuck is what keeps you out of the flow of that creative expression of self, and that creates illness. And he did get stuck in his life, as many people do, with the structure of what we're supposed to do. And we get stuck in the comfort of this is what I do in my day, this is my identity, this is my home, these are my things, this is my show, this is my music. Very oddly, it's autistic people really like structure, or neurodiverse people like structure because it feels like safety. But it's so important to step out of that safety, even though it's extremely uncomfortable, because truly you have survived all of your worst days until now. Every day you thought the sky was falling, it didn't. It may have looked like it, but you're still standing, you know? And so, what's the worst that can happen? Death, that is not the worst thing that can happen. To me, death is not the worst thing that can happen. The worst thing that can happen is living while you're dead. So, move with, move past, don't get stuck. That's what Robert Mitchell says, my daddy. And I am living by that. So I will, yeah, I think I covered all of that. I would ask you, like, as a like exercise, if you felt called to really like do an inventory of how many times you've individually died and been reborn in different eras of your life, because I saw on that walk I was talking about like a room full of all the Audreys. We're talking from fifth grade, second to fifth grade, all the way to now, all the emanations of self, all the heights and weights and hair colors and styles and everything, like model Audrey to like 9 month pregnant Audrey, to like all the ways we can transform and be molded, and we still are resilient and extraordinary creatures. So take an inventory, and I would say thank every single one of them. And who have you really pleased and who have you displeased of these selves? And really it's such an interesting mirror. Like the thing that got me into being a counselor was I was kind of obsessed with the movie Sybil when I was little, because it was all these multiple personalities that are intended to be brought into this integration of self and personalities into like this avatar that is living life without the interruption of all these other aspects of self. And they call it dissociative identity disorder now, but this is really a spiritual fracture that we feel of all these aspects of self. They could be our past lives, our past emanations, our present co-lives that are existing in other places, and our ability to reach them. Who knows? I know that science isn't telling the truth. So I feel like our job is to integrate all these aspects of ourselves and not be in strife, so that the fluid changes can be, you know, more fluid, less resistance, so that it's not going to be so painful in the cocoon. And so with that, I'm going to channel Osho a little bit to see what he has to say to add to that, for us. And yeah, I'm very curious what bring forward. I channel him constantly, so I don't, what's gonna bring forward? I don't know. Okay. Mhm. All right, Osho. What would you add about this experience of the collective transforming at this time, conceptually? Shtabaradi akas apupurinivekio topardire horktine doro. He's showing me a spiral, kind of like if you had a big chunk of taffy that was, in the factory, and it's being twisted and stretched out. Oh, it's many different colors. So you're showing me it's originally like a big blob. It looks like a lump of clay, and then a machine forms it into kind of a cylindrical shape that then it's got many colors in it, and it gets twisted and pulled. And he's saying, and then it's getting cut up into pieces. He's saying, we are all coming from an individual source that are stretched out through time and space and put in different packaging, but we all come from that same source. The colors represent that frequency emanation that exists within all of us, but the nuanced patterning that exists within each individual spark of that source holds a signature that is a little bit different, just like these taffies I'm seeing. They are not identical, but they do resemble each other in that they came from that same source taffy. But each piece is taken to a different place. They're taken to a different place to have a different experience. And right now, you are a piece of taffy from that source taffy, having an experience, but you still coming from that source have a connection and a signature that connects you to every other piece of taffy that was created from that source. That cannot be argued. You were made of the same ingredients. You came from the same colors. You were once part of a whole that has been separated. But the note here is how it can be molded, how it can be shaped. Taffy, once it has been taken to a new home, it can be unwrapped, it can be squished, it can be molded, it can be heated, it can be frozen, it can become many things. It can shatter after it's been frozen, it can become stale. It can do so many different things in that life, and as can you. How do you wish to mold yourself? Would you like to stay separate in those colors? Do you want all those colors to mix together? Do you wish to stretch and mold the taffy so it becomes one color? Would you like to twist it so that you become more complex? Do you wish to consume it, savor it in little or big ways? Do you wish to throw it away? What do you want to do with this taffy you've been given? But remember, it is moldable. You are moldable. Just because you have been in a wrapper and been perfectly shaped from your factory setting does not mean you cannot change and choose to unwrap yourself and explore what flavors, colors, tastes that exist within you. You are able to be molded and shaped, made larger, smaller, and perceived to be different than your origin throughout your life. You are the molder and the molded. You are able to be the creator and that is created at the same time. How do you wish to shape your reality? How do you wish to shape yourself? How do you wish to be used as a whole and as an individual? Do you wish to be used with others or by yourself? This can change. You are always able to change. Your original source spark connection to the origin of that taffy allows you a constant communication with your potential. And to tap into that potential is simply through your consciousness. Do not attach yourself to what you are today, what you were yesterday, or what you are becoming tomorrow, but appreciate the now that you're in and the fluidity of which you can, through momentum and intention, create a future that is brand new. With each breath, you are opting in to participate in that molding of this life and the frequency of the emanation of source that pumps through your body in the capacity to be reborn every single moment. That was really, really freaking beautiful. That was really the visuals, bro. It was Oh my God, it was so beautiful. So beautiful. Ah, okay. Thank you, Osho. I would like to let you know still, if you haven't watched my Kundalini one-on-one activation podcast I released last week, it goes into my offering on the Kundalini one-on-one activation and what that entails, down to the coolest stuff around how we are actually the neurotransmitters and that are communicating between the synapses of earth and source. It's so cool. And the Kundalini activation is what links us to be able for that communication to take place. And if you've ever been someone who's had not enough dopamine in your brain, you can appreciate that Gaia is needing more neurotransmitters online. Um, you can check it out on my website as well if you're interested. I'm also opening up to one-on-ones. I'm not doing any online events right now because I am guided not to do that, because I'm not supposed to hold large energetic spaces right now. I can do that for one-on-ones, and I'm happy to do so. If you haven't checked out my social medias, almost daily Ask Osho channelings, I would do that because I've started to do that on TikTok and Instagram pretty regularly. And just because I'm not doing group events, I still wanted Osho messages to come through. And that is my solution is to post little Ask Osho events every day. And so I take questions from the commentary and try to add them to a pool to keep answering questions from Ask Osho. So I'll provide those links here as well. Happy to do one-on-ones to channel for you. You can schedule those on my website. And if the scheduling doesn't work because you're in Europe or Australia or any of those things, just let me know. I try to make the availabilities accommodating to all time zones, but I will also provide for you a link to my astrologer if you're interested. She also can incorporate astrocartography, which is your astrology of where you live. Side note, I live on my Uranus line, which is transformation, death, and rebirth. So you can't make it up. You can't make it up. Anyway. Thank you. And please share with anyone who feels like they are also on fire right now to reflect on their integration and gratitude of all the emanations of self that they have been and are yet to become. And taffy, taffy. Happy stretching. Bye. Thank you so much for listening today. Please share this with whoever you feel it would resonate with. And please take care of yourself. During these transformative times, we need to be kind to each other, to ourselves, and understand this is all a process. Talk to you next time.